He nodded, wiping his hands on his jeans. Yeah, though you might want to think about trimming that tree out back. The branches are what's clogging everything up. I smiled faintly. I'll add it to the list. Ryan raised an eyebrow, leaning against the doorway. This infamous list of yours is getting out of hand. When's the last time you just let something be? I paused, the knife hovering over the cutting board. It was such a simple question, but it hit harder than I expected. Letting things be wasn't my strong suit. Probably never, I admitted, forcing a laugh. Ryan tilted his head, studying me for a moment. You don't have to do everything alone, you know. I shrugged, trying to downplay the weight of his words. Old habits die hard, I guess. He didn't reply, but there was something in his gaze, something steady, almost searching, that made my pulse quicken. Expanding the story. Ryan stayed for dinner, as he often did these days. It wasn't planned. He'd just linger until the sun dipped low, and I'd insist he join me. Cooking for one had always felt lonely, but cooking for two made the house feel just a little warmer. That night, we ate at the small table in the kitchen. The dining room had always felt too formal, too full of ghosts. This is good, Ryan said, nodding toward his plate. Just pasta, I replied, though I couldn't help but feel pleased by the compliment. It's better than I'd make, he said, grinning. Pretty sure my idea of cooking is dumping hot sauce on whatever's in the fridge. I laughed, a genuine sound that felt foreign in my own ears. Well, you're welcome to dinner any time, as long as you promise not to ruin it with hot sauce. Deal, he said, his grin softening into a smile that lingered just a second too long. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged. I could feel his eyes on me as I sipped my wine, and when I finally looked up, the intensity of his gaze made my breath hitch. What? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He shook his head, his smile fading. Nothing. Just, it's nice to see you like this. Like what? Relaxed, he said simply. I wanted to tell him I wasn't relaxed, that I was anything but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I forced a small smile and reached for my glass again. Climax and resolution. The next day, Ryan showed up with a toolbox and an air of determination. What's all this? I asked, watching as he hauled the heavy case into the living room. Your infamous list, he replied, pulling out a wrench. Figured I'd make a dent in it. I couldn't help but laugh, shaking my head. You don't have to do that. I want to, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. For the next few hours, I watched as he moved through the house with a kind of quiet efficiency. He tightened loose cabinet handles, fixed a leaky faucet, and even replaced the batteries in the smoke detectors. At one point, he asked me to hold a flashlight while he worked on the ceiling fan in the guest room. Standing beneath him, I couldn't help but notice the way his shirt stretched across his back, the muscles in his arms flexing as he adjusted the screws. You've gotten good at this, I said, my voice coming out softer than I intended. Ryan glanced down at me, his smile lopsided. What? Fixing things? Taking care of people, I said before I could stop myself. For a moment, he just looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then he shrugged, returning to his work. I learned from the best. The comment caught me off guard, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. I busied myself by adjusting the flashlight but the words stayed with me long after he'd finished. Closing scene. A week later, Ryan invited me out to dinner. "You've been cooped up too long," he said when I hesitated. "Come on, it'll be good for you." My treat. I wanted to say no, to come up with some excuse to stay home where it was safe. But the way he looked at me, earnest and hopeful, made it impossible to refuse. The restaurant he chose was small and cozy, tucked away on a quiet street I hadn't been to in years. The kind of place Simon would have dismissed as too quaint. "This is nice," I said as we sat down, the soft glow of the candlelight casting shadows across the table. "I thought you'd like it," Ryan replied, his smile easy. Over the course of the meal, the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything and nothing, his work, my hobbies, the latest book I'd read. But as the wine flowed and the plates were cleared, the topics grew heavier. "I've been meaning to ask," Ryan said, his voice quieter now. "How are you holding up?" "Really?" I hesitated, the question cutting through the easy atmosphere we'd built. "I'm fine," I said reflexively. Ryan frowned. "You don't have to say that. Not to me." His sincerity was disarming, and I felt my defenses crumbling. "It's hard," I admitted. "Some days are better than others. But mostly I just feel stuck." Ryan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to stay stuck, you know. You deserve more than that." His words lingered, heavy and unresolved, as we left the restaurant and drove home in near silence. When he walked me to the door, there was a moment, just a moment, where he hesitated, his gaze lingering on mine. I thought for a second that he might say something, but he didn't. And as I stepped inside, my heart was pounding so loudly that I barely noticed the way my hands trembled as I locked the door behind me.